we like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast. I am your host, Raven.
I'm Rogue.
This is Doc.
And I'm Chad.
Our main topic is brought to you by Ateos, which is a pretty fabulous Mexican restaurant out in Linden. The topic that we're going to talk about is the Great Lakes Triangle, which is like the Bermuda Triangle, but with lutefisk and polka music, based in Lake Michigan.
I don't know why they're never like polyhedrons or something.
No, it's always triangles. You know, a little simplistic, simple-minded.
But, you know, the triangle is the most stable geometric form.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, there's no polygons. That's an interesting thought. We should come up with a haunted polygon.
Raven is just shaking her head and rolling her
The Great
eyes.
Salt Lake dodecahedron. Maybe not.
I need a new hobby.
I don't know, that might be a three-dimensional figure, actually, come to think of it. That might be difficult.
Okay, you
Anyway,
want to know why you guys are this way? Let me tell you guys why you're this way. So our last two podcasts, if you listen to us on a regular basis, our last two podcasts we recorded at the same time because we knew that we would be gone and not able to record. And it came out a little late because I sent it in and apparently it didn't get through, so it came out a couple days late. And then Doc hasn't been here. You guys are all just punchy because it's been a while.
It's been a few weeks for me.
It's been a while.
But yes, Great Lakes Triangle. I'm just saying.
All right. So what I thought was interesting about this Great Lakes Triangle is it's smaller than the Bermuda.
Start again and I'll cut that out.
Oh, here we go. We should leave it in. The thing I found interesting about the Great Lakes Triangle is it's smaller than the Bermuda Triangle, but actually more people have been lost there.
And it's located in Lake Michigan. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
A couple sites that I researched said it was just Lake Michigan, which is like the third largest lake in the world, or the fifth largest lake
for
fresh water.
Yeah.
So isn't the largest in Russia or someplace?
Lake Baikal would be the deepest and the largest by volume for sure. But the Great Lakes are right there behind it.
So yeah, they were in the top 5 at least.
So you lived in Russia. Did you live by Lake Baikal at all? Or
I was in Siberia, but I was in western Siberia, and Baikal's way out on that eastern side, so
okay.
I didn't make my way over to Baikal.
Yeah. But some of the places that I researched made the Great Lakes Triangle look like it was over all the Great Lakes, but most of the stories were in Lake Michigan, so I kind of think it's just Lake Michigan. But it's big. If you've never stood by the Great Lakes, you're standing there on the shore, and you look like it's at the ocean because you can't see the other side. They're huge.
And it sounds like some of this lore goes back a pretty decent amount of time, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like to the later 1800s, I think was.
I saw something that said, like, the 1500s.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. Do share.
I'm looking.
Inquiring minds want to know.
I'm looking. Gotta look at my notes. Yeah, it says the first reports of strange activity date as far back as the 15th century.
1400s, right? Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
And something even, I don't know if it's within the triangle, but as I was researching and doing that, they also said there are some monolithic Stonehenge-like structures in the bottom of the lake also that are man-made. And you go, wow, so how far back do those go?
Well, and as we're researching, I was like, holy cow, maybe we need to... We're actually going to break this up into 2. The next one won't necessarily be the next podcast. It can be down the road a ways. But, I mean, we're talking ships, airplanes, UFO sightings, ghost ships. I mean, you name it, they got it.
How does one triangulate the Great Lakes Triangle? What are the points of reference?
So, if you look into my brain and see the picture that I have in my brain, it's going to start at, think of a triangle, and it's going to be tipped a little bit to the west. So, like Chicago and diagonal to your left, and then
back up. I just was wondering if they had like specific like
points,
A, B, and C.
They probably
equals.
do, but
I'm gonna look.
You look it up.
See what I can find.
If you want lots of details, I am not your person.
But you have cool stories.
Yes, I do.
That's the thing. That's
Yes,
what
I
people
do.
listen to us for. They're not listening to us to learn about geometry.
No, this
for
is
hell's
this is
sake.
how I work. So I'm learning Arabic, right? We are in Egypt on the Nile in a boat with a man who speaks very little English, and my Arabic.
I wouldn't say very little English. I would say no English.
He knew maybe
less than very little,
He knew 6 words.
Yeah,
Maybe.
he knew as much English as I knew Arabic.
Yeah.
which
so,
is
None.
So I was trying to remember the word for crocodile because I had learned it. Couldn't remember it. And so I started playing charades with my arms open, making crocodile moves with my arms. That's who you're working with here, people. Don't ask me details. I don't have them. I do crocodile charade with Arabic-speaking men in the middle of the Nile.
And but I want to know, did he figure it out? Did
Yes.
he guess crocodile?
And do you want to know how you say crocodile in Arabic?
Let's hear it.
Timsah. And you have to go, you have to breathe. Timsah. Not Timsah,
Great.
Timsah.
I was
kind
kind of hoping you were just going to say crocodile.
No.
I learned an Arabic word today. Crocodile.
Dolphin is dolphin, so there you go.
Perfect.
All right.
All right, back to the topic. Okay, so it says to date, because even though, the activity started back as far as the 15th century, airplanes were not around in the 15th century. So it says to date, at least 40 aircraft have disappeared, including the disappearance of Flight 2501. And it was quite a large airplane, capable of being able to go through stuff.
Pretty major storms, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
So it was on June 23rd, 1950. That's my birthday. Not my birth year, thank you very much, but it's my birthday. And it was fully loaded. It was going New York to Seattle. So, heavy load of fuel because it's going from one end to the other. No, it's not. Had a layover in Minneapolis, so I guess it could just have a little bit of fuel in it. It gets to Lake Michigan. There's a storm, and if you've ever been in an airplane, when you go over water or go over a mountain, there's a little bit of turbulence because of the different air currents. So that they've got a little stuff going on, and there had recently been some disasters, air disasters. There was a DC-4 that had crashed in the Arabian Sea that killed 86 people within the last 2 weeks. So everyone was a little skittish and nervous, and I've never been in bad turbulence, but I've had some that's like, whoa. So they were supposed to pass over Milwaukee at about 11:30 p.m., and they were supposed to do kind of like this fancy aerial homecoming of sorts for several of the people on board. And about midnight, the control tower at Mitchell Field tried to contact the flight, and no one had heard from them since about 11:13. And at 11:13, they had radioed in to Chicago Control to see if they could reduce their altitude. And for whatever reason, I'm not an air traffic controller. We're all glad that I'm not because you'd all be dead. And they denied it for some reason, because of the air traffic. They said, no, hold your altitude. And never heard from him again. They sent out a blind broadcast asking pilots to identify himself by circling Mitchell Field, because I thought, well, maybe because of the storm and everything going on, we can't hear them. So they said, show us who you are by just circling the field, because then we'll be able to find you. And nothing happened. They're all watching the skies, and they're really nervous because they're like, what happened to this plane? Nothing. And by morning, they're like, okay, something's wrong. We've lost an airplane. So we got to figure out what's going on. So they sent out rescue boats. They sent up planes. And, the Milwaukee County morgue is getting ready for, just all these bodies that they know that they're going to find. They found just a couple little oil slicks in the water, but nothing that an airplane would leave. It wasn't like, oh, it crashed right there. They're like, okay, there's some oil on the water, but Not
There's
really enough.
no debris or anything like that
Mm-mm.
that you'd expect from a plane going down. I mean, you'd find.
Yeah, and that's a large plane. I mean, it's a really big lake, but when you're, when you know where you're looking and you're
Right.
doing it with other planes and everything else, you can cover a lot of area.
Yeah, but the divers thought, well, you know what, we're not going to just blow off this oil slick. We're still going to dive and see what we can find. Nothing. They found nothing. It took 2 days. It says within 2 days, the search had spread 170 miles in diameter, which is a territory, or not a territory, an area larger than Vermont. So they could not find anything. So near South Haven, Michigan, which was actually on the other side of the lake from where they were last located, they found 58 victims. But they said no large pieces of plane. None.
Just people.
Just people. And even the people weren't. I'm just going to read what it says. I try not to read my notes, but I'm just going to read. It says no large pieces of the plane or complete bodies were ever found. Smaller bits of the dead became so plentiful that the beaches of South Haven were closed for several days, and they were buried in a mass grave. So no full bodies.
Just finding body parts.
They're just finding little bits and pieces, and they never, to this day, they have not found
Big chunks of plane.
big
the
chunks of airplane.
fuselage or anything of the plane.
Yeah, nothing.
Interesting.
And, when it comes to plane crashes, it's like, well, it crashed in the mountain and disintegrated, or it's at the bottom of the sea. Yeah, but usually you find big chunks of stuff, or,
Something
most
floating,
of, most of these.
documents or something, luggage, who knows.
And it says, as of 2004, the person that was looking for this, her name is Valerie Van Heest. She's a Michigan resident. They still have not found, even with all the sonar and satellite and everything.
And the modern stuff.
They've still not found this plane. It's gone. Poof.
Poof.
Poof. So this is the one that I found fascinating. It's 17th century. There was a ship. And when you look up the story, it tells you the whole history. This person owned it, and then this person, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, as far as we are concerned, it's called the Thomas Hume. It's a schooner, and they refitted this schooner so that it could transport lumber back and forth across the lake. And so it started doing its job, taking the lumber back and forth. It kind of had a friend ship, which was shipwrecked by a storm in 1912. Yeah.
A companion.
Had a friendship.
A friendship.
We have a friendship.
It was a friendship.
That's right.
Yeah, I probably should go to bed. Okay. And so it sailed for several years, and suddenly it disappeared. Poof. And again, you're like, Raven, it's on a lake. Stuff happens, right?
Boats do sink sometimes.
Boats sink. The interesting thing about this, they were looking for rewards to try to find it because it's got a bunch of lumber on it and some other stuff that they're hauling back and forth. And so then there became this intrigue around it that, the captain actually stole the ship and he's paying people off. It became quite the hubbub. Anyway.
The Red Pirate Roberts?
Exactly. The Red Pirate Roberts. When they finally found this ship, and I was looking to see if the year, in 2006, it was discovered. And when they discovered this ship, so you're thinking, okay, there's a ship, it's on the Great Lake, which is basically an ocean. And, there's a storm, it's going to sink. When they found it, it was perfectly intact.
Just at the bottom.
The person who discovered it said, we have never seen a more intact ship in our entire life. There weren't broken masts. There weren't holes in the side. It's like the boat was on the top of the water, and then 100 years later, it's on the bottom of the water.
Didn't look like it'd been through some stuff.
No. And then when they went exploring, they said it was like a time capsule. They said everything was still there. Coins were still there, and tools and clothing and jewelry. Like And not like, oh, we're in the ocean and the currents are going to shove us all into this corner. They said you could, other than the fact that it's full of water, you could have just walked in there and lived. Take the dress off the hanger and take your change off the counter and put your earrings in.
Silt hadn't covered everything. Everything wasn't covered in silt.
Nope. And to me, that's weird. Because if you're going to sink, you're going to have a broken mast or a hole or
get toppled over or something.
lay down sideways on the... Anyway, so that's kind of freaky too.
Yeah. You mentioned, so we got a ship that went down, a plane that went down,
Mm-hmm.
and then you mentioned something about UFOs.
Oh, yes.
There's
So,
always aliens to blame.
There are.
Almost in every case, I can blame it on an alien.
All right, here we go. Funny story. I'm taking a class on ancient Egypt, and we have to write a paper about the Sphinx. And the paper, I love this professor because all of her papers aren't just a paper with information. It's kind of almost like a role play. In this role play, we're supposed to pretend like we are the Sphinx, and we have to write a letter to the professor and explain to her when our birthday is and when we got our name.
It's autobiographical from the
the
Sphinx
Sphinx.
perspective.
Yes.
Fascinating.
So, she's saying, this is what I need to know. This is the format I want it in. And then at the bottom, it says, I was going to say if it was right there, I would read it to you. It says, P.S. I do not want to hear anything about aliens, comma, men from Russia, comma, or something else. Anyway, it was kind of funny.
She probably gets that a lot, then,
Probably.
the whole aliens thing.
Probably. Anyway, so
Well, it makes sense.
I was like,
That's why.
So I thought, I'm going to start it off with aliens. Oh, just kidding. But she'll probably give me an F. All right. So in 1963, there was a fellow at the Great Lakes Naval Base. Isn't that in Chicago?
Mm-hmm.
And this fellow was at boot camp. And he was just standing watch one night. That was his job. And he said he saw a craft of considerable size appear over the base. And most of the people say they're kind of triangle-shaped. He says it was moving very slowly and completely silent. He said it was hard to estimate size, but he guessed at about 200 feet in diameter and less than 2,000 feet altitude. He says it had rectangular windows on the outer circumference, which glowed with a red-orange light as the craft slowly revolved. He says he didn't really remember anything else. He says, I don't know if there just was nothing else or if it was just such a dark night that the features didn't stand out, but he says that's all I can describe. He says there were probably hundreds of trainees looking out the barrack windows. And as he stood there just kind of staring at this like, what in the heck, a base security truck pulled up to the gate that he was guarding and said, get in, and fast, or to open the gate, not get in the car, but open the gate, open it fast. And he did so. He says, my orders weren't to let anybody in that gate, not even the CO. But it was just so authoritative, and, he's freaked out because of this thing going on. Oh, I'll open the gate. So he said after his watch was over, the sentry that was across the highway, which divided the two parts of the base, was in his company and came over and asked him, he's like, this guy came over with his mouth hanging open. Did you see that? And he's like, dude, everybody saw it. And they didn't hear anything else about it. Well, this guy posted it on Facebook. And because after so many years, because this was, 1963, hadn't really heard anything else about it after that. So he posted on Facebook, or not on Facebook, just on the internet. And another fellow answered him, and he said, I believe I saw the same craft. He said, I joined the Navy. It was in boot camp at Great Lakes in March of 1963. And he and his wife had been watching a show on TV about UFOs. And he said, this was recently, and he said, we were watching the show on TV. And so I told her, I saw a UFO in 1963 at the naval base. And so he decided to go Google it, and he said he was just astounded because he came up with this first guy's story. And so he said, what I recall after all these years was looking out the barracks window one night along with most of my company. What I recall was a very large object with what looked like a porthole light slowly revolving and moving from left to right over the base. I think it lasted for several minutes. The guys were saying, what the hell is that? But the strange thing was that in the morning, nobody mentioned it. And so he thought that he just had a really realistic dream. You know, it's not like everybody in the morning was like, hey, did you remember that?
Remember that UFO we just saw last night?
Yeah, but he said no one talked about it. So he said, even though it's been years and years and years later, you know, like 50 years later, he said, this is the first confirmation I've got that someone else saw that, and it wasn't just a funky dream that I had.
The men in black wiped their memories.
Right?
Look at this.
That's right.
Yeah, he says we graduated boot camp, moved on, and no one ever mentioned it again.
That is kind of weird where he was like, there's like 200 people that check this thing out. We're down to like 2 people that were like, oh, yeah, the porthole thing. UFO, got it.
Right?
Weird.
And I wouldn't think that would be something that you would forget. Did you find out what the parameters were?
I did. They have through it's Lake Michigan, and there's 3 cities. That's how triangles work. Let me see if I can pull up the names again here. Hold on, I'll get you.
See, and while you're looking that up, I actually printed. This is the one that shows where it's kind of all of the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
So this one says Lake Michigan's triangle is Benton Harbor in the south, and then one side of the triangle goes north to Ludington, Michigan, and the other crosses to Lake Manitowoc in Wisconsin. So there's your 3 points for the Lake
Triangle?
Michigan triangle. And then, yeah, I also noticed that there was a larger triangle that really encompassed all of the Great
Lakes Triangle.
Yeah, and this one that I have, if you Google, it's Ohio State University. It's what is the Great Lakes Triangle?
The Ohio State University?
Says the Ohio State University, not just Ohio State.
Really big on the part over there.
But this one actually shows, you know, planes where people were never found, ships where people were never found, planes with people found, ships with people found, and they're all.
I was like, just looking at
over.
that picture, there's lots of dots.
Yep.
So there's been a few things that have gone down there.
Yep. And I mean, they're lakes. Stuff's going to sink. Things are going to crash. But just really quick, I'm just going to give you some dates. I pulled up a thing with some dates on it. So 1962, light plane went down. 63, small plane. 63, a light plane. 64, twin engine plane, 2 people dead. Twin engine Piper. In 64, 65, a Cessna. 65, a sport plane. 66, twin engine Popper. And I mean, it just goes on 4 or 5 a year until this particular one ends. I started on the wrong page. Starts in 1892.
So they were flying Cessnas in 1892?
No,
The small planes?
no, in 1892.
No wonder they crashed.
1892 was a wooden schooner. Might have been the Friendship.
The Friendship. You're right.
Could have been the
probably.
Friendship. There's a tugboat that went down. And then this report only goes to 81. But there's literally 2 pages.
I was gonna say, there's a couple pages there, though.
And, you know, you're going to expect some stuff to go down. But it's a lot of stuff, a lot of people, a lot of weird things.
At a higher density ratio than other places.
Yes. So,
Fascinating. Well, that was an interesting main topic. The Great Lakes Triangle. If I have to pick a lake to visit, it probably won't be Lake Michigan.
right?
Try to avoid flying over that.
I'm not going to fly over Lake Michigan is what I've decided. Or
Well-
use a schooner.
It actually says pilots avoid flying over that.
No,
They'll
see?
go up higher into Canada.
I'm going to adopt the pilot rule, and I won't fly over Lake Michigan.
On our flight, my flight back from Egypt, I was watching the little thing, and we flew by Lake
Ooh, I
Michigan
was about to say, did you do it?
because we came up over through Canada from Frankfurt.
There you go.
And
Did you notice how he said his flight home? His
Yes,
flight
I
home.
did.
it sounds
I
like they
was
were not
wondering,
the same
You're on
flights
separate
home.
flights?
We flew home separately. I had enough.
Just
Apparently, you had something,
stormed out, just
or didn't have something.
No, we got our COVID tests literally as we're driving to the airport, and Chad was negative and Raven was positive, so I got to stay an extra
Yeah,
day.
slight delay.
Oh,
on getting
really?
home.
Yeah, retested because I was like, "There's no way I can be positive and negative." We've been breathing the same air for literally
2
like,
weeks.
2 weeks now. So I retested and it was negative, so I got to come home the next day. Alrighty, well, stay haunty, my spooky friends.
I thought it was stay
Love-
spooky. You're hunting.
Hey,
for
I
me.
shake it up every once in a while to keep things interesting.
Alrighty then. Love you, Nicholas.
Have a good one.
Hey, have a good night.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.